Hello everyone, my name is Joshua. This is the 24th video of my video journal series. Today's date is Wednesday, the 4th of March 2026. And something I want to share with you today is my experience of catching packed trains. Trains where you're shoulder to shoulder or there's standing room only. And this may sound weird, but I actually kind of enjoy catching trains where there's a lot of people around. Even though I'm not a really big fan of crowds, I do believe that trains really foster a sense of community. And by that I mean, when you hop on the train, you're surrounded by people of all these different heights, all these people with different, set of clothes, different genders, different cultural backgrounds, different ambitions in life, different religious views, different political views, and they all got their own, you know, places to be. And I kind of like, seeing that sense of community when you're on a train, where you see the elderly couple speaking to the young couple, you see the salaryman on his phone, texting his wife, children, or boss. You see the, I guess, construction worker heading back home from the construction site covered in concrete and wearing a mini yellow hard hat. Um, I kind of like that sense of community. Trains really bring people together, not just physically, i.e., from point A to point B, but socially as well. You know, People who catch trains, unlike people who go to concerts, who go to comedy gigs, um, they might not necessarily like trains. Like, if you go to a concert, you share one common characteristic with everyone else, and that is you like music, you at least like the band or one of their songs. When you go to a comedy gig, you like, the comedian, or you like their sense of humor. When you catch a train, not everyone who catches trains explicitly loves trains. They just use it as a, tool to get from point A to point B. But at the same time, it brings together all these different people from all these sectors of society into one carriage. And I guess it provides an authentic screenshot of everyday life, you know, that I kind of enjoy. I kind of enjoy, just being immersed in that sense of community and just feeling a part of that community. And, it's not like driving where you're all these mini buggies and you don't really interact a lot with other drivers other than honking the horn because some guy ran a red light so then he can get to KFC 5 seconds faster. With trains, you're physically sitting next to people. Most of the time you'll be on your phone anyways, but I always like to look around and just think to myself, where is that person heading towards? What has that person done today? Um, I just kind of like, you know, being immersed in that crowd. I know I'm not a big fan of crowds, but I like being immersed in a sense of community. And, it really shows how, I guess, multicultural Sydney is and how diverse our city is in terms of age, occupation, and all that. It really just brings people, who have, I guess, opposing interests and things in life all into the same room, which you can't really do elsewhere in life. Like, name another instance where you can gather people of all different backgrounds, all different professions, all different social classes together underneath the same room in an organized sort of way. I can only imagine trains ever doing that, you know? It really brings that sense of community. And, whenever I catch trains in foreign countries, I like to just, imagine myself as a ghost, basically seeing what everyday life is like for locals. I remember when I went to Japan, catching the trains in Tokyo, you will see people from all sectors of society on trains. And I remember, seeing the students wearing their traditional uniforms. And I thought to myself, wow, I never actually seen this in person. The only time I've seen this in person was the only time I've really seen this is, through media, through stuff like anime, manga, or the news. I've never really seen this sort of thing in person, and I've never, I guess, seen all these people from different sectors of Japanese society underneath the same carriage or underneath the same roof. Um, and in that sense, it kind of makes you feel like you're a ghost taking a snapshot of everyday life in Japan. Same thing with New Zealand. When I caught the trains there, I felt like I was capturing a screenshot of everyday life in New Zealand. You know, because trains, people, they bring people together. Same with public transport. Same with trams. Same with ferries. Same with buses. You got all these different people, um, all these people who have, I guess, the complete opposite traits that you do. But if there's one thing that you all have in common is that you're all underneath the same sort of roof. You're in the same carriage. You all got a destination to be, you know? And, you know, I guess we don't really have that sort of experience ever anywhere else in life. Like, apart from when you're walking down, I guess, a busy city street, but even then you're just passing people, you know? With trains, yeah, sometimes you strike up conversations with the person next to you. Um, sometimes you know, can just go on your phone and I guess not interact with anyone, which is what I usually do. But, sometimes I've, spoken to just strangers on a train. Sometimes they ask, oh, how's your day been? I say, oh, it's been fine, you know, or sometimes you just witness other people speaking to each other. And I don't know, it's just kind of like lively, kind of, there's just the small things that count. And I don't know, just brings that sense of liveliness, that you don't really get when you're, I guess, in a car by yourself and you're surrounded by other people who, you know, are also driving cars, but there's a physical barrier. There's, no, I guess, social interaction at all. It's kind of isolating, actually, But I guess catching a train during peak hour can be a little bit annoying, especially if it's been, a long day and your legs are hurting and there's no seats available. And I guess when you pack shoulder to shoulder, it's really uncomfortable. But I like how trains and I guess more broadly public transport really capture a screenshot of everyday life. If you want to know what everyday life is, like a foreign country or a foreign city that you haven't been to, I guess just catch, you know, public transport. That'll be, I guess, the best sort of screenshot you can get of everyday life. And when you're on a packed tram or train or bus, I guess you just see a lot more people of all these sorts of backgrounds and all these sorts of professions, and you know it brings the community together. It brings the suburbs together, it brings the towns together, it brings the cities together. you know I remember plenty of times catching train replacement buses, because weekend track repair, the train system's down, so they have to send out a few train replacement buses. And as long as they may be, those replacement buses are packed, and you get all these people, like I mentioned, on the trains, but you put them in an even smaller room, and you know, I guess it really shows the strength of the community when you see like a person give up their seat for the elderly person, because there's not enough room on the bus for every one of yous, or when there is even a packed train and you see like people give up their seat for another person. That's the sense of community that I like on trains. And the more people that's on the train, the more diverse it's going to be. So that's why, in a sense, I kind of like packed trains. I like that diversity and just being a part of that everyday life. You know, even if I not might not speak to the people around me, I feel like I'm socially connected. That I'm with the flow and I'm not just isolated. Because I do believe humans, you know, they do need that sense of social interaction with their everyday lives, even if it may not be verbal speech. Just simply being around people makes you, I guess, happier and makes you just feel like you're human, not like cars, where you're kind of isolated and everyone's in the same boat. You're just stuck in traffic. I guess with trains, um, you're pretty much all in the same boat, but you're all underneath the same roof, and you know you get a lot more. I guess I guess you get to move a lot more around trains. Like with cars, you just got to sit in your seat the whole entire time. With trains, at least you can like you know stand up and stretch your legs if there's room to do that, obviously, and the train's not like fully packed. Um, but yeah, I just to end, I guess I really like that sense of community that trains bring when you know you're with people who come from all different sectors of society, and in the day, you know, at the end of the day, you're not, I guess, you know, you're not gonna. How do I put this? You're gonna be around people who have all, I guess, different and opposing traits, but at the same time, you share one thing in common, and that is, you know, you need to get from your destination from point A to point B. And despite that, I think public transport really shows the diversity, and trains in particular really show that sense of community that you don't really see a whole lot within, I guess, society today. And you really see like small act of kindness on trains, just even people giving up their seats, which is, I guess, a self-explanatory thing. But I don't know, it's just that little thing that makes, I guess, makes your day a little bit happier. It just really shows how that sense of community can really function and work together just to make small little changes to benefit a pregnant mother or person with a pram's day, or even an elderly person's day. But yeah, I just like that sense of community and diversity you get on trains. The more people that's on the trains, the more diverse it's going to be. And I just like how they unite people, and they trains don't discriminate. Anyone can ride a train as long as they pay the fare. It's not like a car where you have to be, above the age of 16 or 18 or whatever the driving laws are in your state or country. Um, and, cars are a lot more expensive to operate. And, there's some people who are disabled or can't drive, but trains, they're accessible and open to everyone. Same with all forms of public transport, which I like because they really bring together that sense of community. Uh, and they bring together people from all these different areas of society together. And I like how they capture basically a screenshot of everyday life. People, they're all riding the same train. It's not like on the roads where you get people driving different cars. One person's got a Lamborghini, the other one's got like a 30-year-old Volvo. You know, trains treat everyone equally. You're all riding the exact same train underneath the same roof. Nobody's got no shame, no one's got anything to flex on, basically. You're all in it together, and you're all part of that same community. And the only thing, I guess, that defines you on a train is your character, your moral character. If you're someone who talks on the phone loudly, or watches videos with, I guess, their earphones unplugged, which is always annoying. Um, but, you know, I'm willing to tolerate that because I like how, I like just catching the trains and seeing everyday life happening around me. But that's all I have to say. I guess I'll see you tomorrow, and take care. Bye.